Com apenas 24 anos de idade, havia concluído seu doutorado em bioquímica. Aos 26 anos de idade, concluía o seu pós-doutorado pela Faculdade de Medicina da Universidade de Virgínia, nos Estados Unidos. Com mais de 40 anos de pesquisas em instituições como a Faculdade de Medicina da Universidade de Boston e o MIT, dedicou seus últimos 40 anos em pesquisas e descobertas dos mecanismos pelos quais o corpo ativa o processo de resolução, cura e combate a doenças. Seus estudos o levaram a descobertas e 15 patentes de medicações de liberação lenta intravenosa, mais de 40 artigos científicos publicados, 15 livros best-sellers traduzidos para mais de 20 idiomas, pesquisador da Inflamação Research Foundation, hoje conduzindo estudos na Universidade de Miami na reversão do diabetes tipo 1. Por favor, me ajudem a receber Dr. Barry Sears.
This was Time magazine, a major mass market magazine in America. This was their cover story a decade ago, talking about the secret killer, the surprising link between inflammation, heart disease, cancer, Alzheimer's, and a wide variety of other diseases. We are led to believe that inflammation is the bane of our existence. But this is not true, because you need a zone. If we had too little of an inflammatory response, our bodies could not fight off microbes and our physical injuries would never heal. But if the inflammation response is too strong or we cannot turn it off, then that same response that initially saves us and now attacks our own body. So the key is not to eradicate inflammation, but to keep it in a zone not too low, but not too high. Think of inflammation as causing damage, and think of resolution as causing regeneration. If these two forces are balanced, maintain wellness, the body heals. And this gives an indication of what actually goes on. We are attacked by random injuries every day, both external and internal to our body. And these injuries induce an inflammatory response. The pain, the swelling, the redness. But deep in your genes, you also have this resolution response, which when activated causes the reduction of inflammation, the resolution, and eventually the repair. And this resolution response is the body's natural healing response. We all have this ability. And when it works incredibly well. Our injuries, no matter where they come from, are healed. Let me give you an example. I cut my hand. Initially, there's pain, swelling, and inflammation. But within a few days, if I have an adequate resolution response, the hand has healed completely, as if I've turned back the hands of time. That's the resolution response working as it should. But these are on-demand responses. Inflammation is only turned on when you have an injury. The resolution response is only turned on when you have inflammation. And healing of that injury requires that both responses are balanced. Injuries are random. We don't know when they will strike. But the resolution response has to be ready to go at a moment's notice, because if not, our injuries will not heal. And this is how inflammation and resolution works. Something turns on inflammation, and now that turns on resolution, and ideally they should get back to equilibrium, complete healing of the tissue. Unfortunately, we live in the real world. The injury strikes. It causes the inflammation, but somehow your resolution response is blocked. If it's blocked, the healing response is also blocked. But that inflammation simply doesn't disappear into thin air. It stays within the body, below the perception of pain, continuing to cause inflammatory damage until we cause it called chronic disease. And we can take a bad situation and make it even worse by increasing a new source of inflammation in our body. not induced by injuries or microbial invasion, but by the food we eat. And the combination of these two, the unresolved cellular inflammation, coupled with this ongoing diet-induced inflammation, accelerates the development of chronic disease. This might be a graphical indication of how chronic disease develops. We have a sink. We have a drain. If some water gets into the sink, it is removed by the drain, and the sink is dry. But if the drain is blocked, the water builds up in the sink. And then we can speed up that buildup of water by turning on the faucet. That faucet is diet-induced inflammation. And eventually the sink fills up and spills over. When it spills over, we call it chronic disease. For some, it's diabetes. Others, heart disease. Still others, cancer. Or Alzheimer's. These are all chronic diseases caused by a blocked resolution response. So your first goal to treat disease would be to turn off the faucet and then to unblock the drain, to stay in a state of wellness for as long as possible. Most chronic diseases are called idiopathic. That means disease of unknown origin. What causes heart disease? I don't know. What causes depression? I don't know. What causes Alzheimer's? I don't know. The patient has a different definition of an idiopathic disease. The patient's definition is, I feel pathetic, and the doctor is an idiot. Because he says, I can't help you. Of course he can't help you if he can't explain what caused the disease in the first place. And that's why the resolution response gives us a new understanding of what causes chronic disease. And it gives us a new insight how to prevent and to treat existing chronic diseases. It'd be nice if there was a drug that could turn on this resolution response. No such drug exists or will exist in my lifetime. But your diet, if you treat it like a drug, taken at the right dosage at the right time, can optimize and activate your body's internal healing mechanism. So again, it's the key to optimizing this resolution response. It's in our bodies. We just have to learn how to turn it on and keep it activated. But it's highly orchestrated. Step A has to be completed before Step B can take place. Step B has to be completed before you can do Step C. And only when Step C is completed will the body heal. If any one of those three steps is blocked, the body will not heal. And each of those three steps can be blocked by your diet. And so once you know what blocks a resolution response in your diet, and what optimizes the resolution response in your diet, you have the ability to control your future. Think of this like a gyroscope. There are factors, very complex factors in our body that basically constitute this resolution response. There are genes and there are hormones. Some of the genes turn on inflammation. Other genes basically cause the healing. Some of the hormones cause inflammation. Some of the hormones turn off inflammation. We need them all working as a unit. But if they're not, the gyroscope falls to the side and basically does not reroute itself. So understanding the resolution response is understanding how to keep that gyroscope in constant motion. For how long? Hopefully for the rest of your life. Because the day that gyroscope no longer works, chronic disease will rapidly accelerate in your body. Optimizing the resolution response breaks down to what I call the 3 R's. The first step, you have to reduce diet-induced inflammation. The second step is you have to resolve the existing inflammation. And the third step is you have to repair the damage caused by the inflammation. Each of these steps is separate. They must be done in a sequential basis. And the 3 parts of your diet that can activate and optimize the resolution response are these right here. The first is the zone diet. It's not a diet to lose weight. It's a diet to reduce inflammation. The second are the omega-3 fatty acids. These are the fatty acids found in fish and fish oils. They are needed to make the hormones that turn off inflammation. And the last dietary component are called polyphenols. These are the phytochemicals that give fruits and vegetables their color. But in high enough concentrations, they turn on the genes that cause the regeneration of tissue. So let's talk about each of these in a little more detail. As I said, the zone diet was developed for reducing diet-induced inflammation. This makes it an anti-inflammatory diet. But on the next slide, it's a diet that's highly structured and personalized to the individual. Yes, you have to restrict calories, but you can never be hungry or tired. It has to be adequate in protein. It has to be moderate in what are called low glycemic carbohydrates. These are things like fruits and vegetables. It has to be low in fat, but rich in fiber, because those two factors now maintain gut health. To achieve all of those takes some time and considerable effort. But on the next slide, we can see what happens if we don't do this. Think of the zone diet like a carburetor of a car. You can't drive your car all on gas, and you can't drive it all on air. You need some combination. And the better the combination, the better the mileage of your car. Your body is no different. But now your carburetor, your hormonal carburetor, deals with hormones, which are hundreds of times more powerful than any drug. You control them by the balance of protein to the glycemic load in the diet. But what happens if your hormonal carburetor becomes unadjusted? Let's say I eat a high carbohydrate diet, like one that has lots of rice, lots of bread. Wait a minute, I just described the Brazilian diet. That's a diet that will be very rich in glucose, and that will cause too much production of the hormone insulin, and that makes you fat and keeps you fat and accelerates chronic disease. Oh, the obvious answer, eat no carbohydrates whatsoever. That would be a ketogenic diet. These ketogenic diets rise and fall every 20 years. Every 20 years, a new generation finds a new secret elixir for life. Just take all the carbohydrates out of the diet and add more fat. Now these diets are deficient in glucose. Now you have a big problem. The brain needs glucose to function. And if you do not put enough glucose in your mouth by the diet, the brain will respond by sending out a new hormone called cortisol to break down your muscles and convert them into glucose. And as these levels of cortisol increase in your blood and your body, they have three long-term factors. It makes you fat. It causes the body to become resistant to insulin. It makes you sick. It depresses the immune system. It makes you dumb. It destroys the memory cells in the hippocampus in the brain. Well, between these two extremes, these two hormonal extremes, lies the zone where insulin is balanced, and now you lose inflammatory fat. The more excess body fat you have, that's called obesity, the more inflammation that body fat is generating. And this is accelerating every chronic disease known to medical science. So here I have what I call the zone diet food pyramid. You're eating lots of fruits and vegetables on the zone diet, probably 10 servings per day, or about 1 kilogram of raw vegetables and fruits. I say, but that's not fun. That's too hard. But the data is quite clear. If you can eat those levels of fruits and vegetables on a daily basis, your likelihood of dying drops dramatically. Your likelihood of having a heart attack drops dramatically. Your likelihood of having a stroke or cancer drops dramatically. And why? Because those fruits and vegetables, the reason they're colorful, they contain polyphenols. But then you need adequate protein. And how much? A good rule of thumb is about the amount you could put on the palm of your hand at every meal. No more, no less. We need some fat, but it should be non-inflammatory fat. Things like olive oil, avocados, nuts. And how much? A dash. And what about grains and starches, the primary constituents of the American and the Brazilian diet? Try to keep them as low as possible. And that's the zone diet. You follow it the best you can every meal the rest of your life. On the next slide, we can show this on a graphical format. At each meal, you divide your plate into 3 equal sections. On 1/3 of the plate, you add some low-fat protein. And it doesn't matter what your dietary philosophy is. You could be a vegan, a paleo advocate, or an omnivore. Never had any more protein than you can fit on the palm of your hand. But for each of those different dietary philosophies, 2/3 of the plate is identical. 2/3 of the plate are fruits and vegetables. And finally, you add a dash of fat. And that's the balance of protein, carbohydrate, and fat that controls your hormonal carburetor in your body. If you do this correctly, you're never hungry, you're never fatigued, because you're stabilizing blood sugar levels. And that's why the zone diet is used by Harvard Medical School to treat diabetes. It's also used by the athletes I've worked with who have won 25 gold medals in the last 5 Olympics. It gives them a hormonal advantage. And this is work done at Harvard Medical School asking what happens when you make these seemingly small adjustments in the diet. In particular, this is a case where they brought in obese children in Harvard on 3 separate occasions to the medical school. They stayed overnight, were woken up at 6 o'clock in the morning, and catheters were put in their arms so they could measure blood samples continuously to measure the levels of hormones. And on each occasion, of the 3 separate occasions they came to Harvard, they were given meals of exactly the same number of calories. They simply changed the balance of protein to carbohydrate to see how this would affect their hormones. And the 2 meals which they got were high carbohydrate meals. You could see the levels of insulin went up very, very quickly and dropped very quickly. But once they ate a zone meal, the levels of insulin in blue did not go up very high and came back down more slowly. They looked at another hormone in the blood called glucagon. This is the hormone that stabilizes blood sugar levels. On both the high carbohydrate diets, it was depressed. And then eventually, after about 5 hours, came back up again. On the zone meal, it stayed elevated all the time. That's why you want to basically use that to keep blood sugar stable. So 2 things from this slide. One is food works very quickly on your hormones, within a matter of minutes. Drugs do not work that fast, and hormones are hundreds of times more powerful than any drug. The second thing is, whatever you ate, within 5 hours, the hormones are back down again. It means that every 5 hours for the rest of your life, you play the game again to try to keep those hormones in a zone. Now, the third thing is not quite obvious from this slide. However, when they took the catheters out of the children, they then gave them the same meal for lunch that they'd had for breakfast. And they brought them to a small conference room, had a TV set there, comic books, and a table full of things that small obese children like to eat. Donuts, chips, and said for the next 5 hours, enjoy yourself, and if you're hungry, eat. Of course, the Harvard researchers are taking very careful notes of what the children are eating. And the obese children that had 2 zone meals back to back ate 46% fewer calories. No behavior modification, no exercise training. They simply weren't hungry. And when you eat less calories, what happens? You lose weight. When you lose weight, what happens? Your blood sugar levels go down. Your blood lipids go down. Your blood pressure goes down. It's automatic. But it's all controlled by what you ate. Because this diet-induced inflammation sounds very vague. But the most obvious consequence of diet-induced inflammation is developing a condition called insulin resistance. The cells no longer respond to insulin very effectively. So why is this bad? Think of a champagne fountain at a wedding. Nothing's more beautiful. You pour the champagne in the top glass, it fills up, and spills over into the next layer. That layer fills up and spills over into the next layer, and likewise and likewise. Now apply this to insulin resistance. It starts filling up the first champagne glass. It spills over. The first disease that happens as a consequence of insulin resistance is diabetes. 13 million Brazilians have diabetes. But if you have diabetes, you now are in a boatload of trouble, because now you are 4 times more likely to get a heart attack and twice as likely to get Alzheimer's. And when you get Alzheimer's, it's the end of the road. So how do you stop these diseases like Alzheimer's, heart disease, and diabetes? You stop creating insulin resistance. And how do you do that? You follow the zone diet. And for how long? As long as you don't want to develop diabetes, heart disease, or Alzheimer's. So on the next slide, we'll talk about the second part of the resolution response, these omega-3 fatty acids. Because these are now the hormones from these omega-3 fatty acids turn off inflammation. We think of inflammation like a burning fire that dies out the embers. It's a wonderful analogy. It's totally wrong. Inflammation does not burn out by its own. Once you turn on inflammation, it will keep burning. It only turns off by an active measure of making these hormones called resolvins. And unless you have enough omega-3 fatty acids in your blood, you cannot make these hormones. Now, there are 2 groups of fats that are in your diet. One are called omega-6 fats, and these fats actually turn on inflammation. You need to have that turn on to be able to fight infections and injury. But they'll keep turning it on, and it will never stop. The omega-3 fatty acids, in particular one called eicosapentaenoic acid, they turn off inflammation. It's the balance of these 2 fatty acids in your blood that can tell you with frightening precision how much inflammation you have in every organ in your body. This one blood test, which requires only a drop of blood, will tell your future. If the ratio is high, your future is bleak. If the ratio of these two fatty acids is low, your future is bright. It's a future you can change within 30 days. The benefits of having this low ratio is that you're reducing the intensity of the inflammation. You're not depressing it, but just reducing it, so it's easier to turn off. At the same time, you're accelerating the body's ability to resolve or turn off the inflammation completely. After really hundreds of thousands of blood tests, we have some information of what are the ideal ratios of these consistent with a longer and better life. But with like insulin, you have to require a zone. Ideally, it should be between 1 and 3. If it becomes less than 1, you might have some potential bleeding. You'll be depressing the immune system. But as it becomes higher, your body's ability to resolve inflammation becomes less also. And by the time you get beyond 15, you now have systemic inflammation in every organ in your body. Each of these organs are being ground down by increasing inflammation, accelerating chronic disease in that particular organ. In America, we have more medical research than all countries combined. We spend about 20% of our budget on treating disease. And the average American, their ratio of these two fatty acids is about 20, which explains why we pay more for health care and have less to show for it than any other industrialized country in the world. But as Brazilians, I would not want to be too smug because the average Brazilian ratio is 18. And that's why you've been seeing epidemics of obesity and type 2 diabetes take place in your country. These are diseases of excess, unresolved inflammation. Now, over 30 years ago, what they did was to take healthy Harvard medical students. Well, if we look at the ratio of arachidonic acid EPA, they weren't that healthy. 30 years ago, America was already in the midst of an inflammation epidemic. But when they gave them very high levels, about 5 grams a day of omega-3 fatty acids, the level dropped dramatically in only 10 weeks, by nearly 90%. And then they stopped giving the supplement, and the ratios went right back up to what they were before. So the question is, so what? They were interested in how omega-3 fatty acids could reduce inflammation. One very complex way of measuring it is measuring the level of inflammatory proteins called cytokines. And when they measured these cytokines, they went down with the supplementation, and when they stopped, they went right back up. Today, drugs that are monoclonal antibodies that reduce these same cytokines used for treating rheumatoid arthritis, psoriasis, gut disorders. They bring in revenues of nearly $25 billion a year to drug companies. Yet 30 years ago, it was shown by Harvard, you can get the same results simply by taking an adequate level of omega-3 fatty acids at a fraction of the price. And the reason these high levels of omega-3s work because you need high levels in the blood to make these hormones called resolvins. These are the hormones that turn off inflammation. There's no drug more powerful than these resolvins. But they are made and then self-destruct within seconds. So to keep making them, you have to have high levels of omega-3 fatty acids in the blood. We'd say, well, how much do I need? It depends. It depends how well you are. Let's say you look great in a swimsuit. You have no chronic disease. And you're young. You might need maybe 2.5 grams of omega-3 fatty acids. That's 2,500 milligrams. The average American consumes about 150 milligrams of omega-3 fatty acids every day. Not nearly enough. And most Americans are not young. They don't look good in a swimsuit. And they have some type of chronic disease. So let's say you're obese, or you have diabetes or heart disease. You need more to bring the levels of arachidonic acid EPA into that target range of about 1.5. Let's say you have chronic pain now. You have rheumatoid arthritis. You have gut pain. You need still more. And what if the inflammation is now inside your brain? You have depression. Your child has ADHD. You have multiple sclerosis, Parkinson's. The numbers are still higher. Make no mistake, these are high numbers, but they're therapeutic levels required to reduce the levels of inflammation. But this, you don't have to guess, you test. This is a test we developed in the United States. It requires a drop of blood only. But within a short period of time, you say, I can find out exactly what my future is. 1.8, your future is bright. But if you're the average Brazilian at 18, your future is bleak. And if you're the average American at 20, your future is even more bleak. But with the right levels of omega-3 fatty acids, you could change that future in only 30 days. This test is now available in Brazil. We've used it for years in America. It gives you the opportunity to change your future if you choose to. The final stage of the resolution response is the activation of this gene transcription factor called AMPK. It's also the most difficult phase of the resolution response, but it's the key because it is the key to regenerating damaged tissue. What does this AMPK do? The answer is everything. It controls everything we call metabolism. Once you activate this AMPK, it activates other gene transcription factors that retake control of your metabolism and move it toward regeneration. It's like the key to life, if I can only keep it activated. So let's make it simpler. Once you activate AMPK, it repairs damaged tissue. That's called regeneration. And with that regeneration, you would live longer. That's why you want to activate AMPK. But you can only do that if you first reduce the inflammation and then resolve the residual inflammation in the body. Then you can activate the key player to repair the damage done by inflammation to your body. So what exactly are these polyphenols? Well, I said they make fruits and vegetables colorful. And for thousands of years, that's all we thought they did. We now know they do far more. At high enough levels in the diet, they change the genes, turn on the genes that make us live longer. Now here's actually a study done in Italy. They took elderly Tuscans living in the villages in the old sections of Tuscany and saying these are old people eating the old ways, so perhaps we can look at the amount of polyphenols they're consuming, and those who consume the most will live the longest and not die as quickly. In graph B, they looked at that, and to their surprise, they said there seems to be no relation between the amount of polyphenols you eat and how rapidly you die. They said this makes no sense. They said perhaps we're looking at the wrong thing. It's not how much you put in your mouth, but perhaps how much that gets into your blood. Polyphenols are very hard to measure in the blood. But if they get into the blood, they have to leave the blood through urination. So now the researchers collected the urine from these elderly Italians in the Tuscany region. And now they found exactly what they thought they were. Which meant they had the highest levels of polyphenols in their blood. Their mortality rates were decreased by 30%. Drugs don't work this well, but the polyphenols get into your blood, they do. Unfortunately, of the 8,000 polyphenols we know, virtually none of them get into the blood. But there are a few, shown next slide, that do. This is a one polyphenol, highly purified fraction. It's called a delphinidine. Dissolves in water very readily. It gets in the blood intact. It is one of the major polyphenols found in red wine. I said, well, I've solved my problem. I will drink myself to immortality. The only trouble is, to get enough polyphenols to have all those benefits, you need to drink 56 glasses of red wine every day for the rest of your life. Although many try, we tend to fail in that goal. These polyphenols can be concentrated at very high concentrations, so only one capsule contains the same level of these delphinidines as 56 glasses of red wine. That's a much more likely example. In fact, you can use these polyphenol extracts to do an old trick first done 2,000 years ago. It's called turning water into wine. Because when you can see you add these polyphenols, basically in stir, it looks like red wine. Because these are the major polyphenols found in red wine. So the goal, we have now a number of ways of activating AMPK kinase. our best are these polyphenols. They're now available in very high concentrations, so you don't have to drink the 56 glasses of red wine every day. But that's not your only tool you have. The zone diet also impacts AMPK because it's a calorie-restricted diet without hunger or fatigue because it stabilizes blood sugar levels. And the omega-3 fatty acids can also help activate AMPK because the resolvins do that. Your key player, your key dietary player are these polyphenols. But at the same time, it does you no benefits to go through all of this effort to try to activate AMPK if your diet is going to wipe out all the benefits. And there are two things in your diet that can stop the activation of AMPK dead in its tracks. One is eat too many calories at any one meal. How do you know if you're eating too many calories? You're fat. And saying as we see obesity grow here in Brazil as it is in America, the diet itself is turning off AMPK. And the other way to make sure you can never activate this AMPK is to eat too much glucose, which means eating too much rice and eating too much bread. Oh, but you're making my life so miserable. Yeah, I want to drink wine, not 56 glasses, but a few glasses of wine. I want to eat my bread. I love my rice. Okay, that could be true. Then you better hope somebody is working in the middle of the night in some pharmaceutical company to save you from yourself. But you're not going to find that drug coming in any time soon. So we now end up saying, what we can control, what you have 100% control over, is your diet. These are the three components of your diet that constitute the resolution response. And if you do them all correctly, you can bring yourself into this, what I call the zone. In the zone, you have now activated your resolution response. You've activated your natural body's healing response. And you have complete control of that. But the zone is not some mystical place. It's not a clever marketing term. It's defined by your blood chemistry. And there are three markers. Each of these markers requires only a drop of blood. And each of them will tell you something whether you're in the zone or not. The ratio of triglycerides to HDL, the lipids in your blood, are a marker of insulin resistance. The ratio of arachidonic acid to EPA will tell you how much unresolved inflammation you have in your body. Your levels of glycosylated hemoglobin will tell you, are you activating AMP kinase? It's when only all three of these markers are in their appropriate ranges can you be considered well. They act like navigational buoys. And what the numbers are shown on the next slide. If your ratio of triglycerides to HDL is less than 1, your diet is perfect for you. But when you go home tonight, perhaps you'll look at your blood records from your last physical and say, uh-oh, if your ratio of arachidonic acid to EPA is between 1.5 and 3, you're taking the right amount of omega-3 fatty acids. Although this is not a standard blood test you get in your annual physical, the test is now available here in Brazil. A1C is between 4.9 and 5.1. You're taking the right amount of polyphenol. These are your navigational buoys to keep you in the zone. Being in the zone doesn't say you'll never get a chronic disease. It just says your likelihood is very, very low. But outside the zone, all bets are off. And by these markers, I can give you an estimate of what percentage of Americans are probably well in my definition. It's less than 1%. And I will not be all that surprised it's about the same percentage of Brazilians who are simply not well. They're not sick enough to have a chronic disease requiring constant medication for the rest of their life yet, moving down the pathway very quickly. It sounds pretty good, but does it work? Well, let's find out. If I'm right, then optimizing the resolution response should be able to treat untreatable conditions. So let's find two of them are pretty graphic examples. This one I call raising the dead. It's really treating severe brain trauma. When a patient gets severe brain trauma, they pack the head in ice, wheel the patient to the back of the hospital, and hope when the ice melts, the patient might survive. Invariably they don't, or they become a vegetable. This is one of our first tests we did on optimizing the resolution response. This is a major mine disaster that occurred in America about 13 years ago, where 13 miners were trapped in a cave-in and surrounded by carbon monoxide. No human who's ever been exposed to carbon monoxide levels for 41 hours has ever survived. When they finally rescued the miners, 12 of the 13 were dead. And the one they brought out of the mine was almost as close to death as he possibly could be. There he was right there. When he came out of the mine, he had heart failure. He had kidney failure. He had brain failure. Virtually all the white matter in the brain had been destroyed. His chances for survival slim and none, with the emphasis on none. That night I got a call from his doctor. He said, "I've read your books. I think that his fish oil may be his only hope." He said, "What are we going to do about this?" Well, first of all, I said, "Who are you? And what's this we?" Turns out he was the top neurosurgeon in America, and he had just received a phone call from the governor of the state saying this man must not die. And saying, the reason he's calling me, he says, "I think you might be his only chance." So I said, "Fine, I think you're right. He'll need about 15 grams of omega-3 fatty acids." The phone went silent for 30 seconds. He said, "But he'll bleed to death." I said he won't for two reasons. One, we just finished a study with small children with ADHD, and we gave them that level, and they did not bleed to death, and their ability to basically focus was dramatically enhanced. And two, we developed now a fingerstick test to measure the levels of arachidonic acid DHA so we never drop below a certain threshold to guarantee they'll have no bleeding. He said, "We have no opportunity. We must do it." Putting the fish oil into his feeding tube, 15 grams a day, for the next 2 months. At the end of 2 months, he came out of his coma. So they moved him to a rehab facility and kept feeding him with 15 grams of omega-3 fatty acids through a new high-tech delivery system called a tablespoon. So now, 2 months after that, he went home. His heart was normal. His kidney was normal. His liver was normal. And he gave a press conference worthy of any politician. So what did the American press say about this? It's a miracle. Well, if we lived in the 13th century, it might be. Or maybe we just got lucky. There's the surgeon, Julian Bales, myself, McCoy, and his wife about a year after the mine disaster. His wife's pregnant. They now had 2 healthy children. But maybe Julie and I, we got lucky. So next slide. See a wide variety of different cases of severe brain trauma. They all recovered. They all came back from the dead. One of my most recent studies is a young man who had a drug overdose and choked on his vomit. And 2 months later, I got a phone call from his parents. They said, "The doctor wants to pull the plug from the ventilator. They said, my son will have no chance of being anything but a vegetable. Can you help us?" And I said, "I wish you'd come to me a little sooner." They moved the young man to a rehab facility. Followed the same protocol we had done for Randall McCoy. And 14 months later, I got a photo from the mother of the young son kayaking with his father. You notice it's very hard to go kayaking if you're attached to a ventilator, but he wasn't. And then I got another photograph from the family 4 months later of the young man at his sister's wedding. Now, is he totally recovered? No, but he's making very good progress in rehab. But he is alive. What about an aspect of curing the blind? This is actually reversing age-related macular degeneration and optical nerve damage. This is what normal vision looks like. The world is bright, clear, it's wonderful. But macular degeneration is the primary cause of blindness after age 50. And once you develop macular degeneration, your vision looks like the next slide. You're legally blind. There's no known treatment for it. How do you measure macular degeneration? The same way you measure your vision when you go get a driver's license. So each line is called a line of letters, but it's 5 letters in a line, and they get progressively smaller. So if you read the first line of letters and the second line, it means your vision is 25% better. So what happens when you start giving people who already have macular degeneration, who virtually are legally blind, high levels of omega-3 fatty acids? What you can see, depending on the final ratio, you see almost a drug-like response in the increase in the number of letters you can see. And if you get the ratio between 1.1 and 6, your vision has increased by 100%. I made a presentation at an international conference on this data here about 5 years ago. And the only question I had from the attendees, or one of the questions I got, was the data is too good because every patient got better. Some patients who got the ratio down lower did the best of all. But I said, what do you want me to do? To lie? Just as we've had with the brain trauma, we haven't had failures. We haven't had any failures with macular degeneration. So it works. And the reason it works is because you're activating the resolution response. you're able to cause the regeneration of damaged tissue. So let's take another example, the optic nerve. The optic nerve takes the information from the eye and brings it to the brain. And when the optic nerve is damaged, it is said it can never be regenerated. Or perhaps it can be. There are many diseases that cause optical nerve damage. Glaucoma, neuritis, and also multiple sclerosis. But everyone will say once the optical nerve is damaged, you can never regenerate. Now, in these patients, we did higher doses of omega-3 fatty acids, about 10 grams a day, and compared to the patients who got nothing. And you can see over a 6-month period of time, the patients who got no supplementation, their vision didn't get any better. But those who got the omega-3 fatty acids, their vision increased by 600%. And the nice thing about the optic nerve, it gives you an insight into the brain. Because when you have optical nerve damage, you can shine a light onto the retina. It will not activate the optic nerve, and you can see it basically a black spot. But you can see here, over a 6-month period, as the patient was taking high levels of omega-3 fatty acids, the optic nerve was regenerating, just as likely as Randall McCoy's brain was regenerating with the high levels of omega-3 fatty acids, activating the resolution response to cause the repair of damaged tissue. So, in closing, we can now understand this resolution response as a form of gene therapy. It allows us to control our inflammatory genes. It gives you the power to control them with frightening certainty. The blood will tell you how well you're doing. But you need the 3 components of the resolution response acting like a team, like a relay team. It starts with the zone diet. It runs as fast as it can, doing as much as it can before it passes the baton to the next team player. Its job is to reduce the levels of diet-induced inflammation. The second member of the team, the omega-3 fatty acids, grabs the baton and says, I will now reduce any residual inflammation before I pass the baton to the last member of the team, which are the polyphenols, to activate the AMPK that causes the regeneration of the damaged tissue. But like a relay team, if any of those relay runners drops the baton, you're not going to finish the race. Healing will be blocked because the resolution response very deep in your genes is being blocked. So in many ways, I can look back after nearly 50 years of biotechnology and say, we've missed the point. It's not trying to find new drugs that treat the symptoms of chronic disease. We've taken that road about as far as we can go. But the area of medicine in the future that has the greatest upside potential is really basically to increase the resolution response, to make sure we give the body's natural healing ability maximum chance to repair the inflammatory damage caused by injuries which are random. We don't know when they're coming, but they will come. In many ways, we should view disease like a very large iceberg. If you see an iceberg, you see the tips of the iceberg. Most of the iceberg is below the surface. This is a very good analogy for today's conception of medicine. We see the diabetes, the heart disease, the neurological disease, the autoimmune diseases, cancer, aging. Each one is separate disease. Each one needs a separate drug to try to manage that. But what if all of those diseases are connected below the surface, connected by unresolved inflammation? Then we don't need 1,000 drugs. Drugs will still have a role to play, make no mistake about that. But our primary drug in the future will be optimizing the resolution response. No drug can do that, but your diet can. And in many ways, it's back to the future. I'd like to think I thought about these thoughts all by myself, but it turns out they were in the minds and the thoughts and the writings of Hippocrates 2,500 years ago. He said the goal of a physician is to prevent disease. If not that, then cure the disease. If not that, then reduce the pain. We have no cures for idiopathic diseases. We don't know what causes it. But the resolution response, the understanding gives you a new aspect. Maybe they're all caused by the same thing, a blocked resolution response. He also said, let food be your medicine. Let medicine be your food. It's taken us 2,500 years to understand his wisdom. It's how our food can control our hormones and control the expression of our genes. No drugs can do it, but our food can. And the last thing he said, do the patient no harm. And the same is true of basically the resolution response. You can change it, without causing the patient any harm. And you're using the blood to give you guidance. The blood will tell you how to adjust your diet until you are in that zone. And in that zone, you've done everything in your power to optimize the resolution response. So I close tonight with a new vision of what I think 21st century medicine should be. The primary goal is to optimize the resolution response and then use the least amount of drugs to treat any residual symptoms. But to do this requires both hormonal and genetic control, not by a drug, but by a very personalized diet designed for the individual. Because the real goal of medicine is the healing, the regeneration of damaged tissue. And this requires an integrated dietary approach. It's taken me about 40 years to put it all together. But I think hopefully I've done tonight is give you an overview of what the potentialities are of looking to optimize this resolution response. And if you believe what I say, and we've looked at the research that supports it, then you become the physician yourself of the future. Because it's your diet that controls the optimization of this resolution response. And that makes you basically the doctor of the future. And going back again to Hippocrates to say, let food be your medicine. Let medicine be your food. The only question is, do we have the will before it's too late? I'm an internal optimist. I think we do. Thank you very much.